Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Crunch Time Nightly here on ASTV Productions. I'm your host, Joe Hamilton, along with Scott Tobin. Scott, how are you doing, man, on this chilly but yet tolerable day?
It was pretty nice, man. The sun was out. It was in the 50s. Considering what we had last week, you can't really beat it.
Yeah, you can't really beat it at all, and this is the type of weather I like to go for a walk in. Couldn't really get that in over the past couple weeks, but some people like the snow and cold more than others. The only reason I like the cold, Scott, is, let's be honest, my favorite sport right now is hockey besides baseball. So that's the only reason that I like the cold, because you know it's hockey season then. So what'd you do today?
I had to work today, and then I've been doing some stuff this evening, but I'm ready to talk sports now.
Yep. So let's get right into it. The Blues are in action right now. They are facing the Los Angeles Kings, and the Blues, they don't look bad in this game. I don't know if you've seen this, have been watching it all, but what are your thoughts on this first period?
They look all right so far. You know, they haven't played bad so far in this first period, so things are going good to this point.
You know, Carl Gunnarsson's out for the year, and that's another Blue on the injured reserve list. And I got to tell you, man, I mean, at this point, is it time to panic for Blues fans? Because you don't know when you're getting some of these guys back. You don't, and you know, while this is a weak division, in terms of who the top four are, and the rest are all scrubs. But the Blues, if they don't watch it, they can miss the playoffs because of these injuries.
Can you say they're all scrubs when the Blues are losing to those teams right now? But it's not time to panic. You know, you're going to get most of those guys back. It's going to be a couple of weeks. You just got to try to keep your head above water, play around 500, and hope that in the next 2, 3, maybe a month from now, you get almost everybody back healthy.
I like the creativity the Blues are using right now, though, that they have a defenseman playing winger, and Jake Wallman has not looked bad on the wing, actually. And then you have a guy, Nico Mikola, who should be seeing the ice a lot more, especially with all the injuries. A lot of people want to say he's another Colton Parayko out there because his size, but you can't teach size. So you need everybody you can get, and it sounds like the Blues are having to show their depth, and hopefully their depth shows up.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely having to use their depth. They're almost out of depth at this point because they've had such a rash of injuries. But you know, next guy's got to step up, and like I said, they just got to try to stay afloat until they start getting some of these guys back in the next few weeks.
This piece of news came out today. The San Jose game scheduled for tomorrow has been already postponed, and the Blues have to face the San Jose Sharks on Saturday. My question to you is, what do you think is going to happen here? I kind of brought up maybe a scenario where maybe you see the Kings over the weekend. Do you see that happening? Do you see them scheduling another game for the Blues, or do you think this is just an off day to recoup if it is postponed?
I think they'll probably try to schedule a game if it is postponed, but we'll just have to wait another day or so and see what happens with the Sharks. But yeah, it's just another part of what's going on with COVID, with games getting postponed and schedules getting moved all around.
Well, and the Blues had a scare with Sammy Blais on the COVID list, and his test came up false positive. So that's a good thing for the Blues in itself. They keep playing. Seems like they've been doing what they've needed to do, Scott, in order to stay on the ice.
Again, you know, I think most of these guys are doing what they need to do, but you know, stuff happens. You know, we see that all the time. I mean, you can do everything you want to do, and somebody can still test positive. So, you know, it's just more about luck than anything else, honestly.
Yeah, it is about luck, and we'll see what happens going forward. The Blues are still in the first period, no score. It's kind of weird hearing John Kelly and Darren Pang on the national broadcast, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a little bit different because it's not Fox Sports Midwest, but I don't know that it's weird. It's just you just have to realize that they're on a different channel tonight.
Yeah, and you can't be as biased. You know, it'll be interesting to see if the Kings do score tonight, how they sound, because usually you can hear the bias if it's just a Fox Sports Midwest game, but since it's a game that's going to be seen around the country, you may think it's not going to be as biased as you may see in local games.
Yeah, you would think so. They'd have to try to hold that in a little bit. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully the Kings don't score and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, hopefully Benning. I don't even want to say the S word yet. I believe in jinxes in sports. Do you, Scott?
Sometimes they can definitely happen. It definitely seems like they can happen sometimes. So yeah, I don't blame you for not wanting to say it, especially this early in the game.
So Scott, go into baseball real quick. I know you have some, early spring training thoughts. What have you been reading out of camp? What have you been seeing in camp?
I mean, it's still pretty early, but from everything we've heard, everybody looks good. The pitchers have all looked good so far. Everybody feels good. That's good news. That's the one thing you want to hear this first week is that, the pitchers are all throwing well. They look good and nobody has any pain or discomfort, which it sounds like everybody's doing good right now. And, everybody's just trying to get in and get into a groove right now. It sounds like Nolan Arenado is really happy down there. From everything we heard, he's said, this move to the Cardinals, it fits like a glove. He's talked about how much he loves it, how much he loves working with Jose Oquendo. Everybody sounds really happy and really optimistic. I don't know if you saw it, but Harrison Bader came out today and said his goal is to win a Gold Glove. He wants a Gold Glove more than anything else. And, just to see, they just sound really confident and really happy, and everybody seems to be in a groove down there right now, which is what you want this first few days of spring training.
Are you shocked Harrison Bader hasn't won a Gold Glove to this point, even though his averages, so far since he's been up here for full seasons, haven't been real good? I mean, last year he had 229, and you got to hit a little bit higher in my mind to win those awards, but defensively he surely deserved it.
I thought maybe he would win in 2019. I was kind of surprised he didn't win it that year. This past year, not so much because he didn't play as much, the 60 games and, just with the computers doing everything. I'm not surprised, but he's definitely going to win one. As long as he's out there, 140, 150 games, he will win one because he's one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball. So it wouldn't shock me at all if he wins it this year.
Yeah, Scott, I got a kind of a poll question for you, but not really. So do you see three guys in this rotation having 15 wins or three guys in this lineup hitting 30 home runs? Which one's more likely?
The three guys with 30 home runs.
Yeah, I would say so too, just because of the uncertainty you have in that rotation. There's been rumors about Jake Odorizzi's agent being in Jupiter, so we'll have to see what happens there. It'd be nice for the Cardinals to add some depth into that rotation, some veteran depth, because right now they're really young outside of Miles Mikolas. So, and Adam Wainwright. I forgot Wainwright, don't worry. Wainwright, Mikolas. Other than that, it's really young, and you need that other veteran in there in my mind. So it'll be interesting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. KK is not really young.
KK isn't young, but in terms of Major League experience. I mean, yes, Miles Mikolas had a little bit more Major League experience. Now, rather, forgetful, I mean, because it wasn't that good, he still has that experience, and that counts for something, right?
I'm pretty sure Mikolas won 18 games 2 years ago.
No, I'm talking before he came to St. Louis. That was pretty forgetful. I mean, no one really knew who he was.
Yeah, he pitched. He pitched around. You got to remember that he pitched in Japan as well, which KK pitched years in Japan and Korea, so they've got tons of experience pitching in professional baseball. So that makes a difference too. But yeah, it would be nice if they could get a Jake Odorizzi. I mean, I think he's the only pitcher out there that they would have any interest in that's still available, and we'll just have to see. There were some rumors today that the Phillies had checked in on him, but it's just going to come down to what Odorizzi's asking for, because the Cardinals aren't going to give him a multi-year deal. If they can get him for 1 year and $9 or $10 million, then maybe you pull the trigger on that. But we'll see what happens.
You're in spring training, Scott. I mean, granted, it's early in spring training, but you'd think some of these guys would just take 1 year deals and let's go. I mean, you got a CBA coming up. I mean, you don't really want to take more than a 1 year deal based off you want some leverage against the owners. So you take the 1 year deals and go. That's in my mind.
It depends on what the player thinks they need to do. If they're trying to set themselves up for the future, they may want to take more than a 1 year deal. So, you got to look at it that way too. It just comes down to what the player and the agent think they really need.
Yeah, but you also think, you know what? I'm in spring training. I need to be at spring training somewhere. I need to be working out, getting in shape. They're probably close to being in shape already. I mean, you see these guys coming into camp in the best shapes of their lives. And Scott, I got to ask you, is that necessarily a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, you want him to be in shape, definitely. And Jake Odorizzi's been sharing all over social media. He's working out. He's throwing every day. He's constantly posting stuff on his social media stuff. So he's pitching and throwing, and he'll be ready to go whenever somebody signs him.
I don't
know. You want what?
Go ahead.
What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna bring up something else, but I wanted you to finish this point.
No, I mean, you want the guys to be in as good a shape as they could possibly be coming into spring training, especially this year when you're not going to have as many spring training innings to get your arm in shape as normal. I mean, you're going to miss, with the lack of games this year, there's about 90 less spring training innings than normal.
And that's a huge deal. It's interesting how they, scheduled everything, because I think the Cactus League is playing less games than the Grapefruit League or something like that. They're not like real concrete schedules to where they end on time with each other. Does that seem weird to you, or is that just me?
Well, they end on time with each other because they end right before the season starts. So
you know what I mean? Like,
they end at the same time.
They're not the same amount of games, is my point. Like, per team. Like, every team in the Cactus League will have 24 games, and I think every team in the Grapefruit League, if I'm wrong, Scott, correct me, that every team in the Grapefruit League, I think, has 28 games.
Grapefruit League's 24.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the Cactus League is, but I can't imagine it's too many less than that.
Yeah, I can't imagine either, but you'd think there'd be the same amount of games in each league, but who knows? The Cardinals spring training schedule starts on Sunday. You'll be able to hear that on KMOX, of course. Able to watch that game on Fox Sports Midwest. What's it going to feel like, Scott, to actually sit down and watch a baseball game? Granted, you're probably only going to see the regulars. You're probably going to only see the regulars for 2 at-bats, but how is that going to feel to watch Cardinal baseball?
It's going to be good. You may see them for more than that, again, because of the fact that there aren't as many games. And, they're not having all the players there for every game if they're not playing. So you're going to see the regulars play more innings right away than normal because they've got to get these guys in, and you're not going to have all the guys at every game sitting in the stands like you normally would. So, all the players won't be there. So, the regulars are going to play more right away than normal.
What do you mean by more right away? What do you mean, like 6 innings, 7 innings, or do you say
probably,
5?
I would say probably that first week you're probably going to see them play 4 or 5 innings instead of 1 or 2. They're going to spread it out, and guys are going to play more because again, there's a lot less innings to be played in the spring. So you want to get those guys the work they need, and then they're going to do everything else they can on the backfields and stuff like that. But you still got to get these guys all the work they would normally have so that they're ready when you roll into opening day on April 1st. Lester
chimes in here, and this is a really good question. Do you guys think we will see Gorman up here playing second base? Man, what a 2 through 5 lineup that would be. Do you think we see him at some point this year at second base? I don't think so, Scott. I think we see him next year, if anything, because learning a new position, you almost want to get seasoning at that position. So maybe next year, maybe midway through next year. I don't know. What do you think?
I hope we don't see him right away, because if we see him right up here right away, that means that either Tommy Edman or Matt Carpenter or both are having a horrible season. You would hope you would see him maybe in August or September when the rosters expand, get him up here, get him a little bit of time. But yeah, I think there's a very good chance he's your starting second baseman for opening day 2022. I think he'll be ready by opening day next year.
You think it's going to be seamless transition from him going from third base to second base? That ball comes in at a different angle, Scott.
I think he's going to be fine. He got permission to go work out early. He's down there working with Jose Oquendo, who's as good of an infield coach as there is. He's also working with Nolan Arenado, and all these other guys to try to make that transition. So, yeah, I think he'll be fine. The ball does come in a different angle, but if you can play third base, you're going to be able to play second base. It's going to take a little bit to transition, but to get your feet worked down. But, yeah, he should be able to do it. It shouldn't take a whole lot of time. It's going to take a few months, but it shouldn't take a really long time for him to make that transition.
What do you think we see from Matt Carpenter this year? How many games do you think he plays? Because at this point, they're wanting Tommy Edman to play second base full time, and at least what I've been hearing, what I've been seeing.
I think you're going to see Carpenter probably play in 120 or 130 games. I think he's going to, because you look at it this way. You figure that Arenado and Goldie are probably going to both play about 145 games. So there's 17 games at each position, first and third. So there's 34 games. I think you look at Tommy Edman, I think as much as he struggled against right-handed pitching, I think Matt Carpenter is going to play a lot against right-handed pitching at second base. So I think Tommy Edman plays in about 120 games. So you get Carpenter another 40 games at second base. So that gets him up to about 74. Then there's 15 games where he DHs. So then you're getting into the 89, 90 game mark. And then that doesn't count all the pinch hit appearances that he's going to have or times that he comes in on a double switch. So I think you're going to see Matt Carpenter in, like I said, 120, 130 games by the time it's all over with.
Okay, so how many so those concrete starts will be maybe less than 100, but you're going to see 130 games out of them, which I'm hoping so, Scott, because we are paying that $19.5 million deal out until the end of the year, so he needs to be playing as much as possible. Hopefully, Matt Carpenter learns how to go the other way because they're going to be shifting on him.
Well, that's the whole thing. I can say I think Matt Carpenter is going to play, but it's all going to come down to if he can hit or not. If Matt Carpenter is not hitting, he's not going to play this year. That's going to be the whole key. Can Matt Carpenter figure out a way to make a solid contribution offensively? If he does, then he's going to get those chances. If he doesn't, then he's going to be on the bench more than he plays.
Yeah, and I hope they're proactive with this because I have a good feeling about this team. One thing that I posted on the page, Scott, and I think you saw it, the over-under is at 87 wins. Do the Cardinals get over that? I would think so, right? With this team?
I think so. I've got them winning. I have them winning somewhere around 93, 94.
Wow, man. I had them winning 91 just to be – you're not always going to play the NL Central. And you have teams like the Dodgers, you have teams like the Phillies, you have the teams like the Nationals. You know what I mean? So I had them at like 91, 92.
They can beat all of those teams. Are they going to win every game against them? No, but they're good enough to beat the Dodgers and the Padres and the Nationals. Look at that playoff series last year against the Padres where the Cardinals didn't have any offense. They should have won that series. They should have won that series in 2 games.
Yes, they should have. And, well, they looked like they were going to win that, Scott. But, pitching.
Their bullpen had a hiccup, and But they had that lead late in that game. They should have won. They should have won that series, and that was without Nolan Arenado and without Dylan Carlson really being in a rhythm. And so, they could beat those guys in a series. So, I think they can win 93, 94.
What other things are you hearing around baseball? There are still some free agents out there. Are you hearing anything different?
Not really. The guys that are out there, the guys that the 2 big names that are still left that are out there are Jackie Bradley Jr. and Jake Odorizzi. And it just comes down to, what are they willing to accept contract-wise? But there's no real good feel about when either one of them are going to sign or where they're going to go. There was a report today that the Phillies reached out to Odorizzi to see what he was asking for, but it doesn't sound like anything's coming of that. Other than that, it's a bunch of veteran guys that are waiting to see if somebody gets hurt to make a roster. You still have guys like Cole Hamels and Rick Porcello and those kind of guys that are at the end of their careers as starters. And then you've got some bench guys out there like Daniel Descalzo and a couple of guys like that are still looking for jobs. So Josh Reddick is an outfielder that's still out there looking. So, those are guys that are going to find jobs, in spring training if a team has an injury or something. But Odorizzi and Bradley are really the 2 big ones that are left that everybody's kind of wondering where they're going to end up.
The curious case of Yasiel Tweek. He didn't play last year at all. He didn't get a contract last year. Does that change this year, or do you think we've seen the last of him?
You don't hear anything about anybody looking at him. Yeah, that just talks about, again, I think about what he's like in the locker room, that nobody's even really made an offer. He got picked up by the Braves last year, right in the middle of spring training, and then tested positive for COVID, and they released him, and nobody touched him after that. And we really haven't heard any rumors of anybody really looking at him this year. It'll be interesting to see, if there's an injury, if somebody looks around. Kind of like Yoenis Cespedes. There was a report the other day that Cespedes is going to hold a workout here in the next couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see if anybody is interested in him after, he disappeared and just kind of walked out on the Mets last year. So those two guys will be interesting to see if we get late in spring training, if somebody has an injury, if somebody gives them a shot on a minor league deal.
Yeah, that will be interesting. The other thing I want to get off my chest here is all three area basketball teams lost late yesterday. Scott, go ahead, go into this. I'm just an innocent bystander. What the hell went on yesterday?
Illinois lost to Michigan State, which, even though Michigan State is down, they're still always a good program. Illinois lost by 9. They'd won 7 in a row. They had a little bit of an off night, so that's not a big deal. Mizzou couldn't hit the side of a barn last night. I mean, their shooting was awful. There's no way you should lose to Ole Miss twice, but they did. They just couldn't hit shots. When you can't hit shots, you're not going to win. And SLU played the best team in the A-10 in VCU and came up a little short. So the Billikens have lost 2 in a row, but again, VCU, very good team. They're the number 1 team in the A-10. And the Billikens just couldn't pull that one out. Had a little bit of a tough shooting night in the second half. But, they'll bounce back. And as far as Mizzou, that thing's a mess right now. They've lost 5 out of their last 6. Xavier Pinson's played horrible. I think his shooting percentage is something like 28% the last 6 or 7 games. And then Jeremiah Tillman missed those couple of games because of the family issues. So, again, Mizzou's going to probably make the tournament. And they just got to try to figure out a way to right the ship before you get there.
There was a little bit of controversy in that SLU VCU game. Was that a foul, Scott? I'm just going to say it. Was that a foul? That was weak.
It was a tough call, man. It could have gone either way. I'll do it like that. I mean, it really could have.
Scott, the fact is, I don't care if it could have gone either way or not. Don't wait that long to make a call. Especially when the game's down, coming down to the nitty-gritty, and you make a call like that. I think I heard our buddy Frank Cusimano call him TV Teddy, and apparently he's had some run-ins before.
Yeah, I mean, there's refs like that stuff like that happens, and it's a bad call. We don't like it because we're SLU fans, but I see stuff like that happen all the time. In high school games, even, where a play happens at the end of a game and a ref waits 30 seconds to make a call, and you're like, what are they doing here? I mean, it happens in basketball more than we want to admit. And so, it's frustrating, but you just have to look past it and get ready for the next game.
Yeah, you have to. But that's a tough call, because I looked at the replay, Scott, and I'm like, there was hardly even a foul on that. Did you see a foul? Yes or no?
It could have gone either way. Okay. And you have to look too at how they were calling the rest of the game. Because everybody's always going to focus on that play, but were they calling stuff that was questionable all night, or was it just that play? So that's what you have to look at too. Were they letting them play the rest of the game, and then all of a sudden they called that a foul, or had they been calling stuff that could go either way all night? And they kind of had been, for the most part, calling stuff all night. So at least they were consistent. I'll give them that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give him that, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Scott's going to talk about his one thing for tonight. So that coming up on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Scott alongside Joe. Scott, what do you have for tonight, man? You always seem to have some good topics.
We're going to talk just a little bit tonight about the NFL and some of the stuff that's going on, the free agency stuff that's going on. And I think the most interesting thing that's happening in the NFL right now is what's going on in Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger and whether Roethlisberger and the Steelers can figure out a way to work out his contract and Ben comes back for that final year and makes one last run with the Steelers, or if he retires, because there seems to be a lot of back and forth between the ownership group, the GM, former Steelers players, Ben himself. Roethlisberger came out last week and said, he didn't even care if he got paid. He'd play next year for free if he had to. He just wanted one more run. And then the Steelers GM came out and said, well, we're not sure. We're not sure we can make it work financially. And then Ben's agent came out and said, we feel like the Steelers need to really make this work because Ben's been the face of the franchise for the last decade and a half, and it wouldn't be fair to Steelers fans for his career to end this way. And then we had some of the former Steeler players that were Ben's teammates say, you know what, Ben, maybe as much as they love him and as much as they'd like to see him come back for one last year, maybe he should retire because maybe this team's not good enough to make a run and they need that money to go try to build the team for the next few years. So it's just really interesting to watch how that dynamic plays out because you would hate for there to be bad feelings between Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers after the unbelievable, soon-to-be Hall of Fame career that he's had.
First ballot Hall of Famer, Scott?
I think he has to be. I mean, he's won 2 Super Bowls, played in 3. He's put up unbelievable yards. He's been about as consistent as any quarterback in the last 15 years. He's always right there in touchdowns and yards. And, he's been a lot of fun to watch because, that's been like watching a freaking offensive lineman, well, not an offensive lineman, like a defensive lineman playing quarterback, especially when he was younger. Because sometimes, he'd have 3 guys hanging on him and still throw the ball 40 yards down the field. He's been a lot of fun to watch. And, been the biggest reason a few times Ben by himself got the Steelers to the playoffs because he played on some teams that weren't great, but he was so good those years that he got them to the playoffs by himself, basically. So it would be a shame to see it go down in a bad light at the end of his career.
It would, that's for sure. And I got to make a comparison here, Scott. So basically with I compare Ben Roethlisberger with some of these Steelers teams to Aaron Rodgers and some of the Green Bay Packers teams. Because besides Devontae Adams, the last 10 years, who's been there? Who has been the guy that, can spell Adams a shift off? You know what I'm saying? Who is that guy? You don't have that guy. The Steelers, I thought, had more weapons than that, though, Scott. You know what I mean? You had Antonio Brown. You have Juju. And with Antonio Brown there, Juju was a good number 2. But you're telling me he had no other weapons?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that those teams weren't always great because there were a few years where their offensive line wasn't really good and Ben was getting hit a lot, but he still found a way to win. A couple of years ago, their defense had gotten old as they were transitioning from their older defense, the Troy Polamalu's and those guys, to the TJ Watts and the guys they have there now, Bud Dupree's, those guys. There were a couple of years there where their defense wasn't the best because they were in that transition, but they still made the playoffs because Ben found a way and that offense found a way to will them to keep winning. So, you got to look at that and say, they've been as consistent as anybody, other than Tom Brady pretty much the last 15, 16 years. They go to the playoffs pretty much every year, and a lot of it has been due to Ben. And it's just a shame when you see a legendary quarterback like that, and we see it far too often where at the end of the careers they end up having to move on. You don't have to look any farther than a guy like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady right now, and it goes all the way back to Joe Montana when he left San Francisco and went to Kansas City. So you just hate to see guys that have been the face of the franchise in their careers someplace else, and it happens too often in the NFL.
Brett Favre is another example.
Yeah, Brett was a little bit different. It was similar in some ways. That was just a weird relationship the last few years. And they had Aaron Rodgers. They had kind of like we've talked about Aaron Rodgers and his situation there now. they drafted that quarterback, and so Brett knew that his days there were winding down and they were going to try to go cheaper. And Brett still wanted to play and was still really productive, in New York and then in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's just I hated the way that ended there in Green Bay. I'm glad they welcomed him back with open arms when they had the jersey retirement or Brett Favre Day. That was one of my favorite things to see, especially after when you didn't know what their relationship was like. Brett Favre for the longest time, he was like, you know what, I'm not coming back. I'm retired. I'm retired. I'm retired. If you remember, every day on SportsCenter, Scott, you had the Favre Watch. I mean, every day, no matter if there was something to talk about or not.
No, there was, and he had, there were camera crews set up in his yard waiting to see what was going to happen that day. Oh, it happened for 3 or 4 years, and some of that Brett brought on himself because he did, those last 2 or 3 years in Green Bay after they drafted Rodgers, he would say, I'm not sure I'm coming back. We'll have to see. And, so like I said, his situation was a little different because of all that drama there. But again, it was still weird to see Brett playing in a different uniform, although, like I said, he had a lot of success after he left Green Bay.
Circling all the way back to Roethlisberger, do you see that type of situation here brewing?
I don't think so because unlike those other guys we've talked about, I don't think Ben will go somewhere else and play. I think he's going to end up – I think he'll end up either playing in Pittsburgh or retiring. And the big thing is, and, this is the problem that they have, the contract that they signed, it's a $41 million cap hit for the Steelers for Ben Roethlisberger this year. So, the Steelers really can't do anything unless they restructure that contract, which Ben has said he's willing to do. But, again, it comes back to, are the Steelers willing to restructure it, or are they at the point where they want to move on because they don't have a whole lot of pieces, especially on offense going into next year, because Juju Smith-Schuster is a free agent. He may not come back to Pittsburgh. You have Chase Claypool, who looked pretty good last year. But, their offense, they don't really have a whole lot of a running game in Pittsburgh right now. So they need a lot of stuff to kind of revamp that Pittsburgh team. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out.
You talk about the running game. James Conner had a hell of a year last year. Before this season. I'm not talking about this season. I'm talking about season before. He had a good year. What happened to James Conner?
I think he's just a guy who had a pretty good year one year. He was not really, he kind of came out of nowhere. And we see that from time to time in the NFL where a guy will come out of nowhere and have a good year or maybe 2 years. And then it just kind of falls off, just like we talk about with other things, other sports. Teams get video of them, see how they like to run, see where they like to cut, and they play. The defense draws up a game plan to stop that.
Yeah, it's just sad. I hope Ben Roethlisberger either retires or stays there. If he's wanting to restructure his contract, Scott, before we go to break here, if he's wanting to restructure his contract, why wouldn't the Pittsburgh Steelers be up in arms? Let the guy have one more run, maybe. Restructuring his contract, you talked about, he would play for nothing if that was – not nothing, obviously. He does have to get paid. But if he's wanting to take that big of a pay cut, give it to him. Give it to him.
Again, it comes back to whether the Steelers are wanting to just totally kind of rebuild and reset that offense and go in another direction, which, that's kind of what it sounds like, is that they're wanting to start over. So we'll see. You just hope however it ends, that it ends amicably and there's not bad feelings and bad blood there and it doesn't get ugly.
Yeah, I hope so too. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I am going to talk about one of the what-ifs in St. Louis Cardinal history. And it's a big-time what-if. So look for that coming up here on ASTV.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. My big thing tonight has to do with something that almost happened quite a few years ago. There was a story out that I was perusing on Twitter today, and I came across something that was interesting. Whitey Herzog almost wanted to trade Vince Coleman because of his defensive liabilities and his inabilities to drive in runs. The two names that were brought up were really interesting to me. Joe Carter was one of the guys that the Cardinals were looking at. Also, you had a young outfielder in Pittsburgh by the name of Barry Bonds. When I saw that, I messaged you, Scott, and I was shocked. Why would the Cardinals want to get rid of a guy who basically got them to a World Series? I mean, his speed, not his speed alone, but he was part of it.
Well, he helped get them to 2. And this was later on. This was in like 80. I want to say it was like 89 when that happened. And Vince was having trouble hitting. You know, his batting average was never great, but it had gotten worse. He wasn't driving home hardly any runs. I think he was driving home like 20 or 30 runs a season at that point. And his defense in left field had gotten a little bit worse than it was early in his career. And, that was kind of at the time where the Cardinals those 80s teams were broken up. Jack Clark wasn't here anymore. Tommy Herr wasn't here anymore. John Tudor wasn't here anymore. So they were trying to rebuild that club. It was at the end. It might have even been after Gussie Busch died, when Anheuser-Busch the Cardinals were being run by Anheuser-Busch, by the corporate part of the company that didn't really care about baseball very much anymore. But Whitey was looking to try to change things up a little bit and was frustrated with Vince and Joe Carter. And I remember Barry Bonds' name popping up a few times because there were some issues with him in Pittsburgh already at that point with his attitude and how he got along with some of his teammates. But I'm glad it didn't happen. Whitey and Vince kind of mended their fences, and they stuck around until Whitey resigned in 1990 when things got really bad, when Terry Pendleton was gone and Willie was gone and Vince was gone at that point. He signed a free agent contract with the Mets. But, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened. Joe Carter was talked about coming to the Cardinals a lot in that time frame, late 80s, early 90s, because he was from Kansas City, I believe. So he was kind of a Midwestern guy. So that was always the guy when he was a free agent, his name would pop up. But Cardinals were never able to make that happen, and we know how the 90s turned into some really bad baseball.
I was talking to my dad about that very thing today. If we would have had one of those guys as a cornerstone, just think of how good the 90s might have been. Just think of how much better it would have been. I mean, those were some really bad teams. So I don't know about if one of those guys would have made this team a contender in the 90s, but I think it would have been much more fun baseball to watch anyway.
Well, here's the problem you would have had. Even if they would have traded for one of those guys after Gussie died, they wouldn't have kept him, because that's what happened in the 90s. Gussie Busch died, and his sons were running Anheuser-Busch, and they didn't care about the baseball. They didn't care about the Cardinals. It was just another thing they owned that they wanted to make money, and so they got rid of pretty much anybody that made any money. And those teams in the 90s, they had talent, because you had Ray Langford and you had Todd Zeile and you had Bernard Gilkey and you had Brian Jordan early in those 90s, but they wouldn't spend any money to go get free agents, and their pitching was awful. They didn't have any pitching, and they wouldn't spend money to go get it. So even if you would have had a Joe Carter or a Barry Bonds, you wouldn't have had him very long, because the Cardinals at that point wouldn't have paid for him, until you get to that 96 team when the DeWitts take over.
In that case, I wonder why there wasn't a plan put in place when Gussie died to have this franchise not have that gap. When did DeWitt come and buy the team? Like when was that? Do you remember?
96.
96. I get.
It was 90, it was 96. The year they came in and bought the team. They hired Tony. Walt Jockey come in 95. They brought Tony in 96. That was when they redid the stadium, took the turf out, put in grass at the ballpark. And they went out in 96 and got Gary Gaetti and Ron Gant and Andy Bennis and all kinds of people. And that team went to the playoffs again in 96. And that was the beginning of the resurgence of the Cardinals, where as soon as DeWitt took over.
And it pains me that this day I was I was only 3 years old when this happened, Scott. Yeah, that's dating me. I was only 3 years old, and we had a 3-1 lead in that series, and we coughed it up. Why do you think that happened, Scott? I mean, I was too young to even remember it.
You were there.
They ran into the Braves pitching those last 2 games, and the Cardinals. You got to remember, the Braves had Glavine and Smoltz, and Maddox, and the Cardinals were running Andy Bennis. It was Andy Bennis. I'm trying to think now. Hold on a minute. Andy Bennis, Alan Bennis. Oh man, Todd Stottlemyre, I guess. But I think they ran like Donovan Osborne was like their 4th or 5th starter, and they got that 3-1 lead. And then the last 2 games of that series, they got outscored like 26-2 or something. You know, our 4th and 5th pitchers, our 4th and 5th starters couldn't get the Braves out, and Maddox and Smoltz pitched those last 2 games, and the Cardinals couldn't hit. You know, that Braves pitching just took over in those last 2 games.
Wow. Just imagine. Cardinals get past Atlanta. I think they win the World Series that year. I really do.
It would have been if they would have gone to the World Series that year, they would have played the Yankees, and Joe Torre, the Cardinals would have Tony La Russa and their new manager would have gone up against the Yankees and Joe Torre, who was their manager in 95. So that would have been really interesting to see how that played out too. But yeah, it was disappointing. But yeah, those last couple of games of that series were not good.
Maybe that dynasty waits a year to start if the Cardinals get past the Braves. Who knows?
Well, yeah, maybe, and then the Cardinals had a couple of down years after that. And then, a down year and a half, 97 and 98. And then, the trade deadline in 98, you bring in McGuire. And then that kind of started the resurgence again. 98 and 99 were a little bit rough. And then, 2000 was when it really all took over for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I'm hoping with everything, I hope they go out and get somebody like didn't they get Edmonds in like mid-March?
They got him, yeah, right? The middle of spring training.
1-0 Kings.
Yep, I saw it. But yeah, that 2000 team, they went out and got Darryl Kyle. That was big. They've got Darryl Kyle and they got Pat Hinkin. And who else did they bring in? Rick Ankiel was a rookie in that 2000 team. So they had that pitching, and then they went out and got Jimmy Edmonds, and they got Fernando Vina. Edgar Renteria had just come in at the end of 99. Fernando Tatis was still the third baseman on that team. So, yeah, they had a lot of talent on that 2000 team.
Speaking of Fernando Tatis, did you see how he was dressed in that press conference? Dressed for success, right? Yeah. Oh, man, that was awesome. I didn't think they were going to do that. I thought they were going to do everything virtually. I'm shocked they were in the same room for that.
Yeah, I was surprised as well.
Scott, since I was on last night with Rod, I didn't really get to talk about this. That car crash with Tiger Woods. Have we heard anything of how in the hell that happened? Apparently, he had no drugs in his system, no alcohol in his system. But how in the hell do you have a one-car crash where you flip over?
Lost control of the car, I'm assuming, and tried to overcorrect, and it can happen pretty easily if you overcorrect it. If you're going at any kind of speed, that can happen a lot easier than you think. And luckily, he got out of there in as good a shape as he did. Not that he's in good shape, as he had tons of broken bones in his legs and shattered ankles, and it's going to be a long recovery for him, but at least it wasn't a life-threatening injuries.
He's never playing golf again.
I wouldn't say that.
What makes you say that?
Because it's Tiger. You know, people said the same thing when his back was shot. He's never playing golf again. Knowing the competitor that Tiger Woods is and the intensity that he has, that's going to fire Tiger Woods up to prove everybody wrong and come back. Will he actually be able to come back and play well? I don't know. But I would not be shocked at all to see Tiger Woods in a year or so back on the golf course.
Did you see how good Tiger was in St. Louis at that PGA Championship? That was like one of the best rounds I think I've ever seen Tiger shoot. And he was on one leg.
Yeah, you know, his leg is back. But again, you know, I mean, it just goes again to how intense and what a competitor and how driven he is. And that's why I think we'll see him back.
So quickly before we get out of here, Scott, I want to get your thoughts about this. Kyrie Irving wants the NBA logo to change, and that has a lot to do with, you know, Kobe. Do you think the NBA logo ever changes? Just quickly.
No.
Are you sure? Because if anybody, Kobe would be on that logo just because of how iconic he was.
No, it's not changing.
All right. I don't think so either. I mean, because there haven't been any real conversations. It's just some guy mouthing off about how it should change. But, you know, it is what it is. So, Scott, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, that's pretty much it. But, yeah, you know, I don't see any reason why the logo needs to change other than, you know, like you said, it's just Kyrie being Kyrie running his mouth. But other than that, no, I think we've touched everything tonight, Joe.
Does Kyrie ever shut up? Like, does he?
No, he does not.
Oh, man, what a great show tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in at home. For Scott, I'm Joe. We will see you guys tomorrow night.